we've got quite a few presentations within an hour, so we've packed a lot in because we've got a lot to talk about. So we are hoping that there might be some time at the end for questions. However, if we're not planning, we're not sure about that, so please do post questions in the chat throughout the sessions, and if we can't answer them in the hour, we will send something out via email, making sure that we respond to those as well. Okay, so I'll hand over to Andrew to introduce himself first.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks for the reminder about recording as well. That was a timely reminder. Thank you, appreciate that. Sorry everybody, my name's Andrew Cass. I'm the Head of Community Criminal Justice and Probation Services for Change Grow Live. So for those of you that don't know who Change Grow Live are, we're the largest provider of drug and alcohol treatment services in England and up to Scotland too. And we got in touch with the HMPPS when a request came out to look at presentations for today, just to talk about things that were working well. And there are certainly areas within the business that are fantastic in terms of their continuity of care. So this is the real opportunity for us to share some of that good practice and hopefully help you to improve or sustain your current levels as well. Conscious that is a key issue at the moment in time. So like Nikki said, we've got a fantastic range of people who are joining us to present today. Thanks to those in advance. I will do my best to keep up with you with the presentation. But if I do miss the slide moving on, please just give me a nudge and I'll move the next slide on for you. So thanks, Nikki.
Okay, so we are talking about different approaches today. We're talking about our journey, we're talking about the learning, we're talking about our challenges, and we're certainly still on that journey. We're still learning all the time and trying to find different approaches that work for different people. You'll hear a lot about data today. And yesterday, I was in Phoenix Mill in Manchester, which is one of our services, and we hosted a visit with Dame Carol Black. It just so happens this was yesterday. And we talked about continuity of care. And in the visit, we didn't plan this, but Dwayne, who is a current service user, joined the visit, and he'd been released from Forest Bank Prison 6 months ago. And Dame Carol asked him, what was it like? What worked for you? Because he looks really well and he's doing really well. And he said that he was picked up from the gate, and he felt listened to, he felt heard. He was brought to Phoenix Mill. He was introduced to Shine, who are our local Lero in Manchester. We're so lucky to have Shine. He was given tea and toast. So I'm just recounting what was important to him. He was given tea and toast. He was given his lunch. He was introduced to lots of people in the recovery community. He was supported into housing through one of our partners, Emerging Futures. And he said he felt heard, he felt listened to, and he felt respected, and he felt believed in. So that was like a gift yesterday, me coming across him. And he just brought to life some of the things that we're going to talk about today. Okay, so I thought that was a nice example to start with. And talking about data, our first presenter, Audrey, is going to talk about how we do use data at the start of our journey to drive performance. So each presenter, please do introduce yourself and then go straight into your presentation. Over to you, Audrey.
Hi, I'm Audrey Hines, and I'm a data analyst for Change Grow Live across community and prison services. So I'm going to talk about continuity of care, what it is and why it is important. So continuity of care is the transfer of substance misuse treatment from one provider to another, for example, from the secure establishment provider to the community service upon release from prison. For those leaving prison with a continuing treatment need, a target of 75% successful transfer rate has been set by the government to try to reduce reoffending from drug-related crime. The data is reported to OHID, which is the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities, and released quarterly to all relevant providers and interested parties, such as government ministers, who then use this evidence to inform wider policy decisions. Our local OHID team asked us to investigate why we were so far away from this government target when the same provider, Change Grow Live, was delivering the service in both the community and the secure establishment. Both services were convinced that they were performing better in this area than the data suggested, so we began to delve into it to see if we could uncover what was going wrong. Firstly, the process and correct procedure had to be checked for both community and prison services using the correct definition of what official guidelines say is a transfer in custody. I found that initially everyone leaving prison treatment was being recorded as a transfer out. However, this is incorrect. To successfully transfer someone from one provider to another, the episode of treatment must be closed as a transfer not in custody. So this means that when someone is coming to the end of their sentence and still requires treatment, an alert has been sent to the community team. The referral has been accepted by the community team as appropriate for structured treatment. An appointment has been offered and the client agrees to work with the community team. The treatment available for each drug category in community teams can differ, with non-opiate users more likely to fall outside of structured treatment and less likely to engage upon release. So using the definition correctly means only appropriate structured treatment prison transfers are included in this OHID data. So now we know the correct procedure. What was happening with the data? Next slide, please, Andrew. The first thing I checked was to make sure only applicable prison releases were recorded as transfers and that the data was being recorded correctly across both settings. To be recorded as successful, the client must present for treatment within 21 days of release. At this point, they have successfully transferred treatment, even if the full assessment or triage doesn't take place on that day. So, for example, released and presentation can be last minute on a Friday to collect a script. When they come back to be fully assessed, the date and prescription issue date must align. Consent can be given on collection of the script and the basic details assessment started and completed later. If they're in custody for less than 21 days, there's no need to fully reassess, but you must demonstrate the break in treatment within the episode. This is why correct inception and exit dates are important on the alert forms, particularly for those revolving door clients who are in and out of custody. For my role as data analyst, I have access to all CGL Northwest prison and community data, which enabled me to follow the service user's treatment path and do a full analysis of this data. Anomalies with dates of birth, initials, exit rate, exit reasons, exit dates and destinations, etc. were all checked. And for this to be ongoing, relationships had to be built between relevant contacts within those two services, with data sharing practices put in place. Blockages preventing successful transfers were, as mentioned, these anomalies with dates of birth, initials, exit dates, etc. But these were easy fixes. The big realization was the need for communication between services, not just the two services being analysed, but all local providers, both secure and community. With the secure establishment being a local prison, quite often people were in and out for short periods. Alerts hadn't gone out to the community service, so the treatment pathway did not show a successful pickup as the treatment interventions overlapped in both settings. What this means is that closing treatment interventions in the community service is essential to show they are no longer in treatment there, but to enable this, alerts must go out from custody. For prison sentences of less than 21 days, opening new interventions within the same episode allows the treatment monitoring system to follow where they were receiving treatment and when. For sentences of over 21 days, new community episodes are required. Being aware of recording requirements and all the relevant pitfalls, together with improvements in communication between all parties, meant that improvements to the successful transfer rates could begin to happen. Can we have the next two slides, please, Andrew? So slide 4. Improvements made in the past few years following this work are evident in this graphic. The government target of 75% has not only been reached, but it is now being surpassed by this particular service. The learning has been shared across the organisation, but more importantly, across all the local substance misuse providers, irrespective of who they are. The Northwest is now one of the best performing areas in the country for continuity of care. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Audrey. That graph is so powerful.
Yeah.
And I know there's some services in the room that have already reached their 75% target and are still heading for higher, have got aspirations to increase. But I think it's really important for that. We've got many services that are still on the journey. Just as an example, yesterday, Manchester started at 23% and are now at 62%. And it just felt unachievable for a long time. And still we started to see that progress with, I think there's about 30 feeder prisons and loads of different relationships and connections to make it felt like a big mountain to climb, but with great teamwork, communication and partnership work, that they're definitely on the journey. So really good example. I'd now like to hand over to Mark to introduce himself. Mark's going to talk about Prison in Reach, about maintaining connections and supporting a one team approach across prison and community. Over to you, Mark, and thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks, Nikki. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Spedding. I'm the Criminal Justice Manager for the Inspire service that covers most of Lancashire, apart from Blackburn and Blackpool. So in terms of Prison in Reach, the team have been doing it for just over a year now. And when we started, we had a look at the data that Audrey's just been talking about. And there's some clear challenges for us in Lancashire. So we are in the top 3 nationally in relation to the numbers of different prisons referring in each quarter, and it's in between 26 and 30 different prisons referring into Lancashire. We're also in the top 3 in terms of the numbers of people being referred in. So again, each quarter we're looking at 300 to 350. So rather than feel overwhelmed by the data, we decided to focus on our main 3 referring prisons, which you can see from the data there. Preston, Lancaster Farms and Style. They consistently contribute to about 80% of all referrals into Lancashire, so we wanted to focus on those 3. Luckily for us, the treatment provider at all those 3 prisons is Spectrum Healthcare, so the key was clearly building up those relationships with Spectrum, which we've done and continue to do so, and it's never been better. We're on the phone on a daily basis to those guys, and they've been absolutely fantastic. So we're currently doing in-reach to Preston once or twice a week, Lancaster Farms on a weekly basis, and Style on a weekly basis, and then we're starting to move into some of the other prisons. In terms of the benefits, there's far too many to go through now, but 1 and 2 of the main things. So the prison in-reach workers, they'll start the assessment process in custody with that individual. So they'll do the triage and get an up-to-date consent form. So in most cases, excuse me, the prison community appointment is with the same person that person's met prior to release. It's the same person that sees them. So we know how difficult and how challenging, excuse me, how challenging it is for people who leave custody, how stressful it can be, particularly on a Friday when you've got 6 appointments to attend. So the feedback that we get from service users quite often is some frustration with seeing lots of different workers having to keep retelling their story, being assessed repeatedly. But with this, that doesn't happen. That's removed from the equation. So when they do turn up for their release appointment, they're open on the case management system. In most cases, they've already met that person prior to release. They've built up that relationship and a certain degree of trust already. And at those appointments, they're not rushed. We can focus on the here and now, making sure people are safe, and focus on the important stuff rather than starting the assessment. And we've had a lot of feedback from service users in terms of the difference that's made, because they know where they're going, who they're going to see, what's going to happen, and what happens next. If people don't attend their initial appointment, because we've got an updated consent form, we can jump in our outreach car, drive around to the property, check that they're okay. If need be, take the prescription along with us and the locks on kit, and just do some check-ins at their address or wherever they're staying. So again, it enables us to be much more proactive for those individuals that don't attend on release. Next slide, please, Andrew. So we went for the option of all our team having full prison vetting. We do go in on legal visits, but you are somewhat restricted on legal visits in terms of who you can see, when you can see them, how long you've got to see them. So it is challenging to get the vetting in place. but it's absolutely worthwhile. So it helps us, but it also helps the prison teams, because there's no impact on the staff within the prison. When I go in for meetings, I'm mindful that I'm being escorted throughout the building. It can take you 20 minutes from the entrance to the meeting room, and it does impact on staff within the prison. So by having vetting, we're able to go in as and when needed, much more flexible approach. So, for example, the guys who've gone into Preston, they can just go down to the substance misuse team, down with the Spectrum team in their morning meeting at 8 o'clock. They can sit in on the meeting, have a cup of coffee, have a chat with the team. We know this works because it's all about relationship building, and this is where the good stuff happens, really. So our team will have a list of people that they want to see, but quite often the guys at Spectrum will say, look, Dave Smith came in last night, he's coming out to your area, can you go and have a chat with him? Yeah, no problem. So again, it's much more flexible approach. So the staff will just go off down the wing and see whoever they need to see. We've started doing some drop-in sessions as well at Preston and soon in Lancaster. So these are promoted within the prison, and it's about raising the profile of our in-reach workers so people know who they are when they come in. And quite often the guys on the wing will just give them a tap on the shoulder when they're in there, and just ask to have a chat with them, and that's what it's all about. So in terms of next steps, we are going to be starting to do some shared work with our colleagues in Manchester. So you'll hear from Lorna in a minute or two. What we've thought of is, if we've got staff going into Preston and Lancaster farms on a weekly basis, and there are lads from Manchester in there, it makes perfect sense for us to see those people and do the in-reach for our colleagues in the Manchester service. Similarly, if we've got people from Lancashire and HMP Preston, Lorna's team are going in there all the time, they can see those guys. So we're going to look at some shared in-reach. You need to think about the logistics, but it makes absolute sense. It's a win-win scenario. It saves our staff travelling across the county to see people when we've got colleagues in that area already doing that work. So really excited about that. Lots of potential. Think about the number of services CGL have got across the country. We could, in theory, everybody in any prison, regardless of where they are. I know that's a long way off, but it's something to maybe work towards. So we're going to start small and focus on Lancashire and Manchester. And then just to finish, just a bit of a celebration, really. So for the last few months, we've been working on a prison leaver booklet for Lancashire. It's been led by Jackie Dixon, our health and justice lead with the probation service. So shout out to Jackie and her colleague Sarah. It's a partnership piece of work. It's all the northwest prisons, the main northwest prisons in Lancashire, and the community treatment providers in Lancashire. So it talks about what people can expect if they're in custody, what people can expect when they're released, what services are available. There's some pages in there in relation to emergency accommodation, mental health, crisis support. There's lots of community links in there. There's a section on harm reduction, naloxone tolerance and overdose prevention and keeping people safe. It's been reviewed by a number of service user groups, and it's also been reviewed by neurodiversity charity to make sure that the content and the language is absolutely fits in terms of people with different needs. So we're really excited about it, and the way that it's been designed, it talks about recovery support on release and structured treatment on release. So not only does it help the service user, it supports the prison staff in terms of the pathways for community continuity of care. So it differentiates between released structured treatment or released recovery support. So there's an official launch, I think it's next Wednesday at HMP Kirkham, and we're really excited about that. We can't wait to get those booklets out into the prison establishments, because that's just going to really make a big difference in supporting our service users on their release. That's it from me. Thank you, Nikki.
Thanks so much, Matt. There's lots of interest about the Prison Leavers booklet in the chat, and people have asked if an electronic version could be shared. So please do that. Please do share that in the chat, Mark, or we can email it out. Just to add, Andrew's posted people's emails address in the chat right at the top. So if anyone's got specific questions for particular presenters, you can email them directly. But we're also encouraging comments and questions in the chat here. Now, I've checked and I couldn't see Lucy on the call, Andrea.
No, I've had a text. Unfortunately, the curse of COVID was struck.
Okay.
So I'll step in
Okay,
and
fantastic. I
cover
think
that
we
for
might be
Lucy.
a little bit behind time as
Yeah,
well, so that
I'll
might
catch up a bit.
work in our favour. Over
Yeah.
to you, Andrew. Thank you.
So apologies from Lucy. The good thing is that I used to manage the Wirral team, so I kind of know the story and how things progressed. Just bear with me because I'm kind of juggling between presentations here. So I'll go back into the presentation. Go into full screen. Yep. So Lucy is our community integration team leader. So that was the criminal justice team. The team themselves decided that they didn't want to be referred to themselves as criminal justice. They wanted to engage with service users, and that was the name that working with service users they came up with. It's much more about integration or reintegration. So yeah, Lucy's one of the team leaders there. So we've heard about Mark talking about the engagement and prison inreach that communities are doing. This is now that kind of handover back into the community. And as Audrey's already explained, the continuity of care rate was around about 27% a couple of years back. We had a high number of people that just weren't attending their appointments, or if they were attending, potentially they were dropping back out, and just the whole through the gates process was kind of slipping a little bit. I don't think we were going through COVID at the time at the peak with working from home and all that kind of stuff, and it just meant that things were quite complicated at the time as well. The team was also split across generic caseloads, so there wasn't specialist members of the team, and those interventions that we were doing were mainly at that point of release, and it was quite structured. So what we decided to do was, fortunately, there was some additional investment that came into the Wirral via ADA programme. And as you can see on the screen there, we've gone from a relatively small team, albeit at that point in time, that was actually quite big for a criminal justice team compared to other services, to one that enabled us to specialise in particular areas and really look at having a team who specialised in working at the through the gate side of things and the events that happened as the person was going into prison and whilst they were in prison, but then also that team that would take over the baton when somebody had been released. So very similar to Mark, the engagement was maintained with the person whilst they were in prison, really demonstrating that hope and belief in the individual that things could change and that things would be different, and making sure that there was that continuity of care, and I use care in its broader sense there. So what the specialist through the gates worker role actually did was they were there as in this particular part of it. We went to meet and greet days, engaged with the various prisons across the patch, and introduced themselves to the person, or reintroduce themselves because they were the key worker in the community. We also looked at, we had one electric car that we purchased at the start of lockdown. And yes, it's an investment in an electric car, but then actually that investment is pays for itself because you've got reductions in terms of not paying for staff expenses, that kind of thing. And also people actually quite liked being able to use that works car and not having to use their own car for works purposes. So we found that there was much more enthusiasm to do gate pickups or assertive outreach for those people that weren't engaging. The team themselves, with new people coming in, it was an opportunity to refresh what they were doing and really look at some team building. And the focus there became on the service user. Not that it wasn't it before, but really emphasised that need to engage with the person as an individual. So yeah, greater presence on the wings, much more kind of operational engagement in terms of data, like Audrey said. And we've just seen there that by offering that gate pickup, roughly half of the people actually took on that opportunity to be picked up at the gate. And if you look at that, you can see there that that's had an influence in terms of that increase in the continuity of care rate, which, just as a reminder, is up to about 76% now. So to finish, Lucy's put a case study there, and I thought this was really useful because it demonstrated how the team were working and using their resources more effectively. So on the way from picking the person up, 2 people would go. So you had 1 person driving, the other person would actually be doing the assessment with the service user on the way back. So we didn't have this wasted kind of time, especially if we went from Style across the Wirral, which is a good hour journey. The other time we used more effectively. It meant that instead of bringing the person back to the office to do the assessment, we could take them to a local cafe, or we'd take them to probation, or they go to the doctor. And all the kind of substance misuse side of the assessment was already done. So it speeded up the process. It meant that we were more likely to engage that person and keep them engaged. You know, it's like sometimes, you know, if the service user is left to their own devices to travel an hour, 2 hours back, there's lots of things that can influence that change of direction. And just there, the service user stated that previously you would have immediately gone to score and you probably never even made it back to Birkenhead. So some of the feedback there from that different way of working, much more person focused, using the team and the resources that the Wirral have got more effectively. That's all helped to improve the through the gates process and improve the service user experience. And again, just a bit of a refresh, that's how you can see there that since 2021, how those rates have really shot up.
Fantastic.
Thank
Thank
you
you so much, Andrew, for stepping in for Lucy.
No problem.
Great examples there. Okay, so I'm now going to ask Lorna to introduce herself. Lorna is from our Manchester service, and she is talking about the importance of working together with partners. This is a shared approach, and how we support a joined up approach. Oh, that threw me a little bit. Over to you, Lorna.
Thanks. Next slide, please, Andy. Hi, I'm Lorna Campbell. I'm Criminal Justice Manager for Greater Manchester for CGL, so I work across Tameside and Manchester. Over the past 2 years, we've implemented and developed a criminal justice team working alongside police, probation and prison services. In addition to the continuity of care offer, we've also improved partnership working as well as building those valuable working relationships with all the agencies. This includes other substance misuse services in Manchester. By developing these, we've seen an increase in joint recovery plans where the service user is central and has a voice in their own recovery, and they have a say of who they want to work with. So basically, we bring everybody around the table to do what our ultimate aim is, and that is to support the service user to access the services they need to help them to reduce reoffending and to develop positive lifestyle choices. Next slide, please. As with all the projects, we need to have the systems in place, but we know from all that emailing feedback to probation officers for everyone that comes to appointments is tedious and often doesn't work and hasn't worked in the past. So in Manchester, we get all our referrals and we feed back through a system called the Refer and Monitor platform. This is an electronic database that misses out the middleman, and information is fed back directly onto probation systems on attendance and any concerns we have. And we also have an SLA in place to support this information sharing process. All the staff are co-located in approved premises, probation offices and police stations. And as we get referrals prior to release from probation practitioners, we can also be involved in the induction process now by way of introducing ourselves and 3-way meetings. What we also wanted to embed in the service offer is a way to celebrate those small achievements. Obviously, graduations from rehabs and completions of orders or licenses are a celebration in itself, but so they might previously have not attended an appointment, they're worth celebrating because it can support people to look at their other goals they want to achieve. And we can share that information with all the agencies involved. So part of the partnership working involves training for probation staff and CGL staff alike. We are currently offering drug and alcohol awareness training sessions across 10 probation departments and 6 approved premises in Greater Manchester. And CGL staff have access to a training library from probation, which includes training on MAPA and information regarding breaches and recall processes. Resettlement panels are now developing in the prisons, and staff attend the local ones to provide pre-release advice and support. These are in addition to the normal individual visits that staff do. We're also producing a pre-release pack similar to one that Mark spoke about, and we're working alongside Forest Banking to produce information for people so they can plan their release so they know what's available for when they come out. And as well as that frontline team, we've also attended strategic meetings with agencies. This gives us a chance to be part of that decision-making process, enables us all to develop and expand the service that we offer. Next slide, please. So one of the many implementations that we've made in Manchester recently are where we see people. So one of these is the women's hubs and centres around Manchester. So we've got 3 in Manchester and 1 in Tameside. We've designated workers attending the hubs across the city, and they support females to access more specialised services. It often feels like the scales are weighted in favour of the female returning back to custody, just because of the sheer lack of female-specific offer in some areas. We know that both male and females can have complex needs when they come out of custody, and these are often overlooked. But we do see females being released from prison and quickly return back to custody because they haven't engaged, and this is probably due to a variety of reasons, such as the amount of appointments they've got to attend on that day, the lack of appropriate services, and such as housing, and not knowing where to go and get help because it could be treatment naive. So in Greater Manchester, for example, there's a requirement to allocate 10% of CAS 3 beds to women coming out of custody. But due to the increasing demand of the needs of male prisoners, these allocations are given to the men. It's impossible to ring fence those beds because we'll end up with empty properties. So when a woman comes out of prison, her choices are limited. And if she is given accommodation, it could be in any of the boroughs in Manchester, and it moves her away from those networks of support that she might have available. We're all aware of this, and all the agencies are working together. And one of the options we're looking at is female-specific accommodation, such as abstinent housing or just supported housing for when they come out. One of the other areas we're concentrating as a partnership is developing a place where females can go when they come out of custody to get support from under one roof. But we're not just looking at just females on probation or coming out of custody, but for all females in Manchester where they can access that support, including clinical drug services, harm reduction, housing and sexual health support, just to name a few. We work closely with MASH, which is Manchester Action for Street Health Team, and other female-specific agencies to support service users and potential service users who might want to access the service but are afraid to do so or unsure how to do so. Next slide, please. So this is some feedback from some of the teams that work at the women's hubs. So Jen's a service user. She came out of custody and she was pregnant and she had very little support. She was convinced the child would be removed but engaged with services to improve her choices. This is a typical case where she would have been expected to cross over to Manchester for different appointments in different areas, and potentially we were setting up to fail. However, as the partnership agencies came together, she could access that support under one roof, helping her to engage. And I mean, I've got the case study on there, but she's now undergoing an assessment, and social services have stated they're not intending to remove a child and they're going to support her to keep it so she can be the best mum that she wants to be. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the partnerships we formed in Manchester to support people coming out of prison and those on probation. As we said, we attend resettlement panels in the prisons. We have team meetings at various different agencies, and external agencies come to our team meetings. And finally, we've just started to form a further alliance with the Mustard Tree, which is a charity run in Manchester to support people from all walks of life to gain access to clothes, food, support and friendship. We currently utilise their building and their support to run a street engagement hub twice a week. But from this month, we'll be utilising the space to run a one-stop shop for people coming out of custody on a Friday, who can benefit from being able to see and attend all the appointments they're expected to do, including clinical interventions if needed, under one roof. They can also get support with housing, have a hot meal and access to everything the wider service has to offer. Next slide, please. So this is a quote from a CGL service manager, and I think it says it all really from the partnership working. And as services, we need to work together. The data for continuity of care is great, improving all the time, as Nikki mentioned before for Manchester, definitely. But behind that data are people, and we need to ensure that they have a voice and we get the support that they need. We need to continue improving partnership and focus on the need of the people and the communities we work with. Thank you.
Amazing, Lorna. Thank you so much. I personally felt the impact of the great partnership work that you've kind of led in Manchester yesterday when I met some people who'd been part of the service. And when you hear the stories and the impact we've had, it really does make a big difference. So thank you so much, Lorna. There is some comments and questions in the chat about the refer and monitor system. People asking, is that only available in Manchester? And also some comments about community services not being informed of the time of release of people when they're leaving custody, particularly in the south, I think, and staff having to wait about for hours and hours and hours. So I don't know if anyone's got any ideas on how we can influence that, how we can work with prisons to change that. Yeah, any thoughts, questions in the chat, please. But now I would like to hand over to Charlotte and Dominic, and they're going to talk to us about the amazing Prison Leavers pilot in Cheshire. So over to you, Charlotte and Dominic. Please do introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Nikki. My name's Charlotte Roberts. I am the service manager for CGL in Halton. And hopefully Dom is about somewhere to introduce himself.
Got it. I've got it on unmute in big letters and I never done it. So, Dominic Dakin, I'm the project manager for Emerging Futures on the pilot and now on the legacy, the Cheshire Recovery Housing.
Thanks, Dom. Next slide, please. So Dom and myself could talk about the Prison Leavers pilot all day if we were left to our own device because we were really passionate about it. So we tried to condense it into what it was as quickly and as briefly as possible. So the Cheshire Prison Leavers pilot was funded by the Ministry of Justice and it was called the Local Leadership and Innovation Fund, and what they were looking for was new and innovative ways of working with people who were leaving prison. And what we talk about today, I suppose, isn't anything new or innovative. I suppose what was different about our pilot is that we were one project doing it all together as a team. It launched in November 21 and we were given just under £1 million of funding, and it lasted for 15 months, which was actually an extension to what we were originally agreed. We always knew the pilot would end. And it was highly researched by the University of Bath, with the findings are due to be published in 2025. The big important part of our pilot is we developed it in collaboration with service users. So we got some people who had been leaving prison or were currently in prison to talk us through their experience. And I'll tell you what they told us shortly. And we delivered it in partnership because we were a great believer in working together as a team on the pilot. We had to choose one prison and we chose HMP Old Course, and we looked at people coming out to either the Halton, Warrington, Macclesfield or Crewe area because they were covered by CGL services. And at that time, the engagement on release was at about anywhere between 26 to 32% for them areas. So we definitely needed to improve. And one thing that we noted as well is for those releases coming out to our areas, 36% on average were also being logged as no fixed abode or NFA or had no address on release. And during the pilot, we worked with 124 prison leavers. So we offered it to anyone who was coming out into our areas. And it was an opt-in scheme, so people didn't have to. And 124 prison leavers decided to take the opportunity. And there's a wonderful photo of our team as well. So the aims of our pilot, so what we wanted to do, the prison leavers told us that leaving prison and not knowing where they were going to live really impacted on their ability to focus and decide what their plan was going to be for release. They couldn't imagine where they were going to live and who they were going to live with. And so they were unable to start planning really. Housing was a big thing. Knowing where they were going to live was really important. And what they said is even if you know them services in your community, it was still daunting because you didn't know who you were going to be going to, who you were going to be allocated to as you work at in them places, who you were going to see on your day of relief. And so they just felt like they didn't have that trust, and trust was massive, and it really came through on the pilot. That trust in professionals was a theme that people who were in prison or going through that journey really wanted. Mental health came up really high on what prison leavers told us, that not being able to access mental health services or support or psychological support, and that breakdown between prison and community and back again for people who were maybe going in and out of custody really impacted on continuity of them receiving treatment. And we really wanted to address that. We were realistic in knowing that people do go back and forth between custody, and we didn't want people to have to keep restarting journeys. So we wanted to keep that as less of a break in between people's treatments as possible. Release day was overwhelming for people, and people just said sometimes it's easier to do what you've always done. And some people actually said going back to prison was easier because they felt like the pressure was off at times. And so when there wasn't much on offer, they just felt like prison was easier. And next slide, please, Andy. So what did we offer? We wanted to bridge that gap between prison and community. So we wanted to be in the prison. A lot of people have talked about it today. And we started working with people 12 weeks before they were released. So they got to know who their specific coordinator was going to be on release. And they were the individuals that worked with them. And we called them Connecting Communities Navigators. And we wanted to make sure housing was confirmed way before someone was walking out the door of prison. And Dom will go on to tell you a bit about the housing. Gate collection was huge, was massively important for people. We had an 88% of those on the pilot actually got into our car. With the remaining, there was only one person who didn't get into our car, and that he turned up an hour later at our building. And the remainder of the people we planned transport via their family because that was what they wanted on day of release, and that's what their family wanted. So every single person, bar one on the project, was picked up at the gate. And we really thought lived experience and people having access to that was massively important for people to see from day one, that hope. And we actually had lived experience going in and out of prison to support people before coming out of prison as well. One of the things that we did, similar to what people have talked about, we had that day of release, we would bring them into our recovery cafe, which is run by people in lived experience, all people who've been in prison as well, coincidentally, who were able to talk through. And some of the people who were in that cafe at that time had also resided in some of the Emerging Futures properties. We wanted to make sure people had psychology access, and part of our psychology team offered psychological support both in custody and in the community, and we liaised with the partners within the prison around that as well to make sure that they were included in what we were doing. We included Buvidal as an offer. We thought that was really important, and there was an example where one individual who went back into prison for a very short recall sentence due to a prior offence, who was on Buvidal injections, and the prison worked alongside us to make sure that they could continue to have Buvidal injections whilst in custody, so to not disrupt that prescribing. We had the ability to change location of residence outside of area, which was different, so that people could opt to choose to live. If they were a Holton resident, for example, and a defendant in Holton, they were able to go and live in Cheshire East or in Warrington, which we got our local authorities on board with. And we also ensured we included things like life skills when people were on release. Next slide, please. So I'll pass you over to Dom. He'll tell you a bit about the housing.
Okay, thanks for that, Charlotte. Yeah, on the slide you can see that was the current housing stock at the end of the pilot. We started, that wasn't the starting point, no. We started literally with one house in Cheshire East North, in Congleton, and then we tried to get one house in each of the 4 areas. At the start and during COVID, it was really difficult getting properties. So to get them, it was hard won sometimes, but we ended up with one in each area, and then we introduced another one in Warrington and one in Cheshire East. The Holton house, and I know, was a big bug for everyone, especially because a lot of the pilot was centred around Holton. We had the house early, but it took nearly a year to actually get it fully functioning. The great news is since that house has opened, it has been 100% function. You know, its occupancy has always been full. End of the pilot in March, we had 13 residents across the houses. We currently have full occupancy in all them houses, and we are going to be opening another house this month in the Warrington area. So the legacy of the pilot is that the houses have all stayed and they're all continuing. So we'll look at the next slide. It'll show us one of the first house in Warrington. There's a bit of a smile on the guy at the door. I'm a Warrington lad, so it was really significant that we got a recovery house, a prison leavers recovery house in Warrington, and that house is currently full at the moment. There's a couple of the residents that have stayed on since the prison leavers pilot, so they've made a big impact in the community. Next slide is another one of the houses that we have in Holton, which was finally opened. And I love going to both of them houses. The guys really look after them, especially the Holton house. There's had a lot of work still done on it while we've actually been in there. And the guys have really looked after it and made it their own. And significantly now, there's still 2 prison leavers in there, but there's also 2 guys from the community as well, from CGL Services, which has been part of the legacy. If we look at the next slide, this is sort of some of the learning. I mean, at the start, the criteria was really kept to a minimum. It was literally, if you was in the catchment area, you had drug and alcohol issues, and housing or lack of housing was going to be a barrier to your recovery journey. That's what we were saying, you know, you could apply for the housing. As mentioned already, some of the applicants would have had issues moving straight back to their local area. So we had the flexibility of being able to move some of the guys to the different areas to start the journeys, and their path might be going back to that area or going back to the local area once it was finished. We didn't get permission for them to become a local connection. So the guys was made clear that if there was evicted, they would have to go back to their own areas. But we're still working with the councils around that stuff. But these houses are still going today, and some of the same lads are still there. Also, we was able to offer people on HDC or people coming out on curfew tags, or we've done a lot of work with IOM and the navigate team. So there's some on alcohol tags. We was able to have all them extras added into the housing. They could be put on any license agreements, which continues again to today. So what was really, it was hard won. It was really slow at first, but eventually we become an alternative to approved premises, but also a better choice for some, because some of these prison leavers was going to approved premises, doing the same thing, meeting the same people, and just going back to jail, and they was getting stuck in that continuous approved premises prison, approved premises prison. So we've done a little bit of an intervention there, and hopefully that'll long continue as well. The best thing that I've got another presentation to do on the pilot, and the best thing, the chapter that we've called it is the game changer. And I really believe initially when we started, a lot of the guys was relapsing. It was absent housing, so you got evicted and they was getting recalled. So we had a really high level of recalls, and that's not what we started the pilot for. That's so we sat together as a team. You know, Jodie from CGL was the project manager for CGL, and we come up with some good ideas. We had to go back to the Ministry of Justice with him, but eventually we put a 28-day notice warning in, and if someone was really, really adamant they wanted the help, we give them another chance. Even that, to improve numbers, we ended up giving a 7-day warning. And eventually, if they was to be evicted, we opened one of the houses as a transitional house where they got a second final chance where they could stay for 28 days. And in that 28 days, if they was going to get back on track, we could put them back in one of the abstinent houses. If not, you know, we'd look at moving them on to something more suitable. But the great thing is by that time, they'd been out of prison long enough for the probation officers to not recall them. So we stopped that recalling, or that, you know, potential of getting recalled. And that is, we've carried that on in the legacy. You know, this is the only Cheshire recovery housing, the abstinent housing. We still continue using that process because we want to give the prison leavers the best opportunity. Finishing on that slide, we have to add the early days, the great support from the prison. We're doing assessments and referrals and getting us in and making us essential workers to get in was invaluable. Learning for you, Charlotte.
There's lots of different learning that we took between the housing and the project. Having the prison on board was really key. When we first started, we were only getting referrals into the community for people who were on opiate prescribing. We really didn't get anybody who had alcohol issues or non-opiate issues. One, for capacity of the prison. I mean, it was lockdown, but people understanding that, you know, just because they weren't using in prison didn't mean they didn't have issues in the community. And what we saw a big change in was those individuals who had wider substance issues with alcohol, etc., in the community referring themselves into our pilot. And I think having that full package offer was key. I think there's a couple more slides, so just scoot forward a little bit because I know we're short on time. Or just go back one, sorry. So having staff base was invaluable. Partners being flexible, so we had probation signing people up with their license conditions in our cafe over breakfast. Having lived experience from people in prison straight through and supporting to the community really had made a difference, and that was part of our legacy, is that probation of continue to fund a CGL, lived experience post to work with prison leavers in the Halton community. Community staff based in prison who are able to engage with people themselves. I mean, now Dom can't walk down the wing without people running after him to talk about housing. CGL is well known in the prison in Altclose, and we aren't a provider in the prison, but the team actually, we were never there to replace any other services in the prison. We were there to enhance, and that really came through. We didn't want to step on anybody's toes because there's some great services, and we just felt that it could be pulled together a little bit better. Tracking transfers between prisons was really important for our pilot. We knew people can move, and I know Sandra's coming on next, she will talk maybe a little bit about that, but the prison establishment has got obviously a way to run, and people can be moved at the drop of a hat in between different prisons, but that has a real disruption on them individuals. So we really had to work hard to make sure that support plan and package that people were getting was able to be applicable if they moved out of Altclose prison. And there has been a legacy, Dom's touched upon it, but within our area it does feel different for prison leavers. now things have changed. People can access psychology, people can. And whilst we don't have the £1 million anymore, what it did do is start to really embed some changes, some relationships, and some different hearts and minds from agencies about how to best approach prison leavers. And then there's just one final slide, which was a quote from one of our service users, where the pilot had changed their life. They didn't know where they'd be without the support. The support that they received they'd never experienced before when leaving prison, and it made such a difference. It was the best thing the prison had ever offered that person. Seeing all this happen really gives the drive to change, and knowing people want to help me achieve a better life. I've not felt so scared leaving prison this time. I just want to thank everybody. They go above and beyond. Thanks.
Wow, gosh, last time we did a run through, the photographs weren't included, and that, yeah, it just blew me away, that. And when you say you could talk about it all day, I really believe you, and I'm not surprised. It is absolutely amazing. I really, really felt that was so powerful. Thank you, Charlotte and Dominic. I'm blown away by that. Lots of interest in the chat as well. But without further ado, because we are short on time, I'm going to hand over to Sandra. I'll let Sandra introduce herself. Sandra's going to talk about the concept of lowering the prison walls, which I love. Improving prison outreach, community inreach, and connecting teams. Over to you, Sandra.
Hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be speaking with you today about lowering the prison walls. It's been in my heart since I started in prisons many years ago. I'm currently managing 6 prisons across the Northwest, 4 in the subcontractual arrangement and 2 are CGLs within their own right. Next slide, please. So as you can see there, and it's been the theme throughout these presentations, that communication is key, and that works both ways, but also within the prison as well. We did set up a meeting, the Recovery Inclusion meeting, which included the NDTMS teams, all the services within the local footprint. It brought us all together so that we could talk about local intelligence, share good news stories, pick up problems so that we could problem solve them. It just became a really, really a real good hive of activity, and we've probably got about 50 or more people that attend that meeting now. The NDTMS team that attend has really helped so that we can look at those figures, that's 75%, especially for the community, and also around tracking between transfers within prisons and releases as well, and being able to get that better. Also around that communication between prison teams and community teams, it's not being afraid to pick up that phone and speak to people or invite them in. We needed to learn about each other's delivery and work together in collaboration and how we can enhance the work for our service users. And we did that. We put that in place by community services coming in to see us into our integrated into our team meetings and us going out there. We have connecting community worker within the profiles, which also allows for a keener way of working with regards to especially reception, which when they are leaving prison, it's still called reception, but we are hoping for it to be called discharge lounge soon, so that CGL worker can be in that area to give those additional messages around harm reduction, relapse prevention, and encouraging men to take nasal naloxone, but also offering injectable if they want it. As mentioned in all these presentations today, we brought in that visible community drug worker into the prison. They were key holders, are key holders. They have all their security talks, a full induction. We have had some lessons learned from that around them not just coming in and doing it themselves, making sure that induction is really robust for them, because coming into the prison isn't everybody's cup of tea. And again, just going back to our prison connecting community lead, they also go out into the field, into the services in the community, can also do some hand holding through the gate, but also enabling that transition from the gate to the person who may be picking them up as well, which supports them massively. And through that recovery inclusion meeting, we also held a really good development meeting. It was a partnership celebration where we had Humankind, Delphi, CGL, and all the prison drug strategy leads that were able to attend as well, that came in, again, sharing good practice amongst us all, and ensuring that we're all seen as different providers, but all seen as one, and we're integral. Next slide, please. So again, it's just about knocking down those barriers. It's been really important. It's really important showing everybody that's involved in that service users recovery journey that we're all here to support them. And one thing which is really important to think about, in our reception prisons, we're seeing our service users in a real poor state of physical and mental health. And it's a prime opportunity to help them to get well, to think straight for the first time in a long time. They're able to build themselves up. They've got a roof over their head, and as Charlotte alluded to earlier on, you know, sometimes it's easier to come back into prison because they know they've got some security, especially if they're going out to nothing, to live under a bridge, for example. Again, improving our communication with partners, involvement both internal and external to the prison. We have loads of services within the prison itself, and it's really important that we have got those robust relationships with them. Again, talking about somebody who's going to be leaving and we don't know what time they're getting out. We don't know what time we're getting out, but we can advocate and work in collaboration with the prison to try and support that process better. Working closely with the NDTMS team has been crucial for us, so that we're gathering all that correct information. And I think for our service users, it's really important that we have a quality outcomes improved by ensuring incremental changes are made in a real dynamic way to offer the best possible service. So we're being realistic with what we can offer in the prison, and then allowing our service users to see what's happening in the community for them. I think an improved service delivery by ensuring staff and service users are involved in all our decision making, and we build on what is existing and the foundations for our service users who are at the heart of all that we do in the prison, and having a robust volunteer and service user scheme within the prison. Our volunteers are just crucial, and we can work without them, obviously, but working with them has made a massive impact to the service. And I know I'm being pushed on here, so I could talk about this all day. I'm really sorry, but please contact me if you need to, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sandra. That was really powerful. Yeah, sorry you were cut short there. So it's 1 minute before we close. Please do post any questions in the chat. Just the collaboration and the sharing of info in the chat, as well as what we've heard today from presenters, has been really, really valuable. And it's been great connecting with everyone. We are on a journey. We're still learning. Please do share any of your experiences or examples with us also. Massive thank you to Andrew Cass, our criminal justice lead, for pulling this together and hosting, and most importantly to the services and the staff and the volunteers who are delivering this every day and put that extra effort and really make the difference. What a fantastic event. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye.